you are credited for the misnomer.
Oh, thanks. The other phrase I've tried to take credit for is AI karaoke.
Well, Fenwick has the framer. Hill has nests. Bill has
a good attitude.
Yeah. I'll take it.
Just trying to figure out something that was benign.
Yeah, I know. Mac 512. Was it an SE?
I had one of those at some point. No, I had a 128. I had it before the 512.
I did as well. I in fact put my own chips in to make it a 512. I'm just curious, what is over your shoulder? SE30?
That is my original 128 from 1984. Now, it was eventually, there was a guy, this was so early in the Mac history, there's a guy named David Baginski who lived out in Gilbert, Arizona, who was a very good engineer. And at those days of early Mac, he was actually able to go in there and do two things which made that not useless. First and foremost, he installed a SCSI port on the back of the thing so that I actually had something more than the 128 kilobytes of memory.
That was an elite hack back in the day.
It was. And what was the other thing he did? He put a SCSI port in. Oh, he did something else to it. I don't think he increased memory, but it made it. Well, that SCSI port was life-changing because before then you had to work on floppy disks, and literally you couldn't write a story without disk swapping 70 times.
I had the strongest wrists ever.
Yeah.
Because the operating system was on one floppy, and they were single-sided. Right. They were single-sided 400K. They were. That's right. Then we went to double-sided. Woo.
Yeah. And they looked so cool because they were small and plastic rather than the big 8-incher floppy disks.
Who won the software installation? Was it Microsoft Word? There was a lot of swapping going on there.
Oh, anything that had
OS2 version
read
1.
The program, then go
I had
OS2.
I had original Mac Mini, and I got Microsoft Word. It was on floppy. 21 disk swaps just to open a document.
Yes.
21, no hard drive.
You know it's bad if you're counting them.
One 3.5-inch drive.
How convenient! The convenience, the ease of use that you were given.
Yes, at this point, my Mac became a doorstop.
It was,
I threw it out the window.
Rudimentary, to say the least. But it did have icons, and you could paint on your screen in black and white.
Very close after that is when Avid came out. And yes, the 3 gigabyte drives went up, and they were $10,000. 3 gigabytes.
That's when Avid had to bless all the hard drives.
Everything. They had to bless the whole, and it still didn't work. But
3 gigabytes was on. Mine was 40 megabytes. 30 megabytes was my first hard drive for the Mac.
My first one was 11 megabytes of Corvus.
And it was AVS. No, what was the original compression scheme that Avid used? And it was horrible, like 8-bit, big chunks of video.
My first computer was an 8086 from AT&T with a 20 megabyte hard drive.
Never worked on a trash 80, but I, in your town, helped put one in a museum.
Excellent.
Greetings and welcome to Office Hours. If you are new here and you want to learn a little bit more about what we do, head over to officehours.global. Our first hour, we answer your questions on media and digital productions. And our second hour is something that we typically want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we'll be talking about artificial intelligence, AI, and how we're using that in our content creation process. And speaking of process, it's time for us to get the show started. Bill?
Our first question this morning comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Vera, Florida. And Andy wonders, what equipment and setup would you suggest for a small group, 8 to 10 people, in a hotel breakout room, collaborating with others on Zoom? And he notes the emphasis is on audio quality. Thanks.
Jason?
Might be a little bit too elaborate, but I would say Shure goosenecks, and Shure makes an auto mixer that's pretty good, and then maybe share one very large television so that everyone can see Zoom and mute and unmute themselves when appropriate.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, it's hard. It depends on the hotel room as well. Hotel rooms actually tend to be better than conference rooms. They tend to have more carpet. They tend to have better things on the walls. And so depending on the room, you may actually have a slightly better time. But if the room's too small, you may end up with a lot of echo that's there. That'll be really the challenge that you have. Goosenecks, I think, are a great suggestion if you're going to have 8 or 10 people there. Of course, we've done ones where we hand around a couple mics where people can use those, the SM58s. Usually wireless becomes a little less messy to do that. If you use webcams, the one thing to know, and you're bringing the audio in directly, the audio, if you're not delaying audio going into the computer, the echo cancellation will mostly work. So it's not, you can test that and try to figure that out. The other thing you can do is if you're going to start building a bigger system, what you're going to want to do is use a Dugan auto mix and have the two things that are competing, the online and the in-room mics. So that's what you put those into buses and you have them going back and forth because that way when the online person's talking, it pushes the in-room mics down. When the in-room's talking, it pushes the online mics down. It takes a lot of tuning to do that. And there's only a few people in the world that I have do that for me. So it does, that can be done, and we do it on higher end events. But the audio will be the biggest challenge. Giving everybody a mic is the best way to do it. And sometimes it's not practical. And this is where, by the way, something like the Microflex from Shure works really well. Is you can give everybody, little headsets with little in ears. So the thing to look at is Microflex by Shure has both in ear and mic inputs in it. So it's got the T, I believe it's a TA4, which is the Shure input, and a headset mic. So you can give everybody, if you really want to go crazy, you could give everybody a little headset mic, as well as it has a mic in it, but you can put that and then give them their own in-ear. That would be a great solution. And the Microflex will, you can just plug them all in, hit program, it'll just set them all up. It connects wirelessly and then transports that via Dante back. So if you really wanted to take it to the next level, that's probably the way I would go to make that actually work. It would feel like a lot of wires and people would complain because that's what they do. But then after they did it a couple of times, they'd be like, this is the best interaction with people on Zoom that I've ever had. So that'd be something I'd suggest.
And Courtney, you want to add something?
I just worry about all the monitoring cables and such. I would probably put the remote people that are coming in from Zoom on an open speaker somewhere and make sure you turn on let Zoom manage the anti-feedback mix minus for that particular channel, and then put everybody else, as Alex said, on auto mix. And that feed goes into Zoom as probably a single feed. And then maybe you could have a switcher with deciding on video which side of the room you're going to shoot. I wouldn't get it too complex with 10 webcams, 10 microphones, 10 in-ear headsets.
And by the way, I'm not suggesting having 10 webcams, but I am suggesting having 10 headsets. So the thing, we've done lots of those. I mean, you can have up to 2 of the Microflexes run pretty effectively, and they're really easy to manage. That's the big thing. Again, if you're talking about being serious about it working, I will tell you, the end of many meetings has been open speakers and open mics. Like that is like I have watched other people do jobs that I bid on. I watched those just to see how they turned out. And usually there's this echoing that goes on, and you can see it in the people in Zoom because their eyes open up or they start talking really slow because they're hearing themselves back. it rarely works well. Like it's a rare occurrence that it works super well. You can try it, but it'll only work if you're using SM58s or something like them, and only work if they hold them close up. If you give them labs or give them some kind of area mics or something like that, you're going to get echo, or it's going to just sound chunky as it just digs into that process. So I'd be careful with that. What I would do for the cameras, by the way, is if you have set places for people to sit, I would put the camera pre-program 2 or 3 PTZ cameras. And then what you do is you just push the number of where the person is, and those cameras zoom to where they need to go. And you can do it with 2 really effectively. 1 is okay, but you'll see the zooming. If you do 2 of them, it'll move and then cut, move, then cut, move, then cut. And it works pretty well. And you can actually put it in a horseshoe and stick them right in that at the end of that horseshoe, so that everyone's it can see everybody, not quite from the center, but kind of over. And those 2 cameras one has one half and the other has the other half, and it works. It's better than the best alternative, which is to put everybody in Zoom.
And Javier.
And just to add, I think it's very important when you have people inside like a virtual, like a physical room, and other people in Zoom, that whoever's leading the meeting is keeping like a tight pace and knows when to stop like table side discussions that won't be heard from the people from the other side. Because I had one time this kind of situation, and the way we solved it was having like an audio engineer doing the mixing like on the site, and that helped a lot for the audio going out was clean. But when 2 people get their mics muted, they start talking like side by side, and that's not going to be heard on the other side. So when you have like these hybrid situations, you have to be very tight when leading the meetings.
And Alex. Final
thing I'll say is that interacting, I've done this for over a decade. Having the live audience and the online audience interacting with each other is, it is a high risk maneuver. You just need to know that it's a high risk maneuver. The payoff is very low, and there's just not a lot of ROI there. So just always think about it really hard as to whether you really need to do that, because it does take people and expertise and things, or it will not turn out well. And most people underinvest, and then they end up with a lot of splat on the wall. So just something to keep in mind.
Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina, North Carolina says, Ken, so nice to see you on Office Hours. Would you please give us an overview of AI and YouTube Shorts?
Agreed. Ken.
Hi. Yes, I will. It's changed quite a lot for us in the last 6 days. The process we now use, we'll talk more about this, I think, in more detail in the second hour. So you have to stay tuned for our second hour on AI. But just quickly, we now use Opus Pro, and what used to take us hours now takes minutes, if not seconds. It is it's phenomenal on how quickly it produces YouTube Shorts. If I was building an application to do this, and we have built some, we've used AI before to do this, this is the program that I would build. It covers every aspect of what you want to put in a YouTube short. But as I said, we'll talk more about that in detail in the second hour. But Opus is the program to use now.
We are looking forward to that share and the backstory as well. Next question.
Tim Holmes in San Lorenzo, California is up next. What is your most fun media production project? Why was it successful, and why was it so satisfying to you?
Jason?
Okay, there are a lot of them, but the one that comes to mind is the first FAA-sanctioned drone event. We did an air show, and we were actually allowed to be. So when you have an air show, there's an air box, right? That's all the way across, where the seating is. And then there are 2 air boxes, almost like end zones. And we were allowed to put drones up in either side. And it was a tremendous amount of work. And the payout was just all the fascination and all the really cool questions that we got, before, during, and after.
Go ahead, Sky.
This one's hard. So to Jason's, choosing one, I will say the rocket launch. And again, it was not a financial success, but when John said, "Hey, we're going to do something," and everybody said that's impossible, and the other half of the people said, "I'll take that on," and they bid into it, and the community that was created, the interaction that again, creating something, using my creativity, meeting people for the first time in person. Met Bill for the first time, drove up from San Diego to Las Vegas up there. And so to be creative with others. Now, economically, it may not have been a success, but I did meet Jeff Keithley in person and have consequently worked for him. So there was a longer ROI in that. So that's one of my few things that, again, if fun is the qualifier, that was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work.
And Mitchell?
Tim, that's a big ask because I've been around a long time. But I would say the most fun I ever had on a project was in the mid-'80s at the peak of multi-image production. That's when we used to use carousel slide projectors controlled by a computer to do these extremely widescreen programs. And we were doing a show called The Art of Hair and Fashion at the Grand Opera House in Wilmington. I had this big sound track associated with it. And one of the funny bits in it that just gave me a chuckle, and they didn't tell me they had done it, is we were experimenting with high-speed photography to shoot actual animation on a slideshow, maybe about 10 or 15 frames per second. And I was giving direction to the model, and apparently my spin and subsequent bow ended up in the show. So it was just kind of fun. But those were the days. Big soundtracks, wide screen projection, and the sound of 30 projectors going pretty amazing.
That sounds so awesome. We need to do like a throwback show or something for that kind of technology to share that with the rest of us. Courtney?
Yeah, I remember the sound of 30 projectors changing slides at the same time. Yeah, mine also goes back to the 80s, like 1983. I used to work as a production sound mixer on a lot of documentaries. And we did this one for the BBC called Master Photographers, and we got to spend 4 days with Ansel Adams at his house in Carmel, go out shooting stills with Ansel and working in his darkroom. And it was a 3-man crew with a producer, so it was great. I mean, his wife served us lunch in his dining room, and he played the piano for us. It was great. That was one of, and there were several documentaries that I worked on with a lot of famous people. With those memories will last forever, I tell you.
Go ahead, Bill.
So I was thinking of the word fun, and there was a couple that were leading candidates, but I think I'm going to settle on a pro bono project. And I always thought to myself in the early days, if I can keep a couple of slots for pro bono and not have a client looking over my shoulder, I'll have more fun with it. And I did one decades ago for a wildlife rehabilitation group here in Arizona where I was living called Liberty Wildlife. And the volunteer corps was fabulous, and we had a lot of very connected people. So I ended up one day out on the Superstition Mountains on a dusty road with a 100-foot crane with my camera on my shoulder, watching the release of rehabilitated hawks and falcons and things like that. And I'll just never forget two things about that. One, the absolute beauty of sitting there on top of that crane, looking out over the superstitions and thinking, how many people get to do this? Then the other thing was a kind of a creative awakening for me. I came back and we had done a bunch of interviews with people, and I'm a voice talent, so I do a lot of voice work. And so remember that old phrase, when the tool you have is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail? Anytime I had a problem with a program, I could talk my way out of it by writing some narration and put it in there. This was the first project where, as I went through all my footage, I realized, wait, he said that, and she said that, and somebody else said that. Can I not do any narration and just tell the story through the actualities? And I was able to do that, and it just changed all my thinking. I stopped relying on my crutch, and I tried to let the people in the program tell the stories. And for me, that was transformative. So I always remember that one really, really big time. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think that I think when I think about fun, I think of different things. so that I think that, for me, one of them, we did a live stream with Jon Stewart where he was, we built this little rig that he had to sit. So he was chest up in like this little opening with a whole bunch of puppies. It was about more puppies, a fundraiser. And so he had all these little puppies running around, and it's Jon Stewart, so he's really funny. And so he's just telling jokes, but he gets like we get comments coming in, and his wife puts a comment into the show that says, if you don't come home without one of those puppies, don't come home at all. So it was like one of those things. So the two of them were playing off of it. It was a lot of so I think we got a lot of laughs out of it. I think the one that I really enjoyed the most, probably because I had a little more time to plan it, was we did a 360 shoot, multi-camera 360 shoot in outside of Budapest for the Mars. There's a National Geographic TV show called Mars that was kind of a drama, or is a drama, and and we did 5 cameras of 360. And what was really fun about it was you're really talking to the set designers, and you're going from one place to the other, and you can look around while they're talking, and people are able to ask questions. And I think that I felt like that was one that, like, oh, that'd be really good. We should do this all the time, where you go to sets and you get, it was fun, and we had a great crew. So it was so it wasn't very stressful for me. I mostly scanned things. I didn't really have to worry about it. And I think that I definitely enjoy shows a lot more when I have a highly skilled crew that is plenty for the show, that is all there. Like it just means that I'm not stressed about trying to get things done. So I think that was part of what made it fun as well.
And to add to this pot of richness, for me, it would have been about 10 years ago, we got an opportunity to pitch, and actually, like, the King Center, which is in Atlanta, the Center for Nonviolence, I always get this, nonviolent social change. And in January, they do the Salute to Greatness, and it awards different people in the community and corporate entities as well. And so they were looking to really connect with a younger demographic. So just coming in and coming up with an idea that, and this is like early days, I would say, of just influencers and then also live streaming. So to be able to bring a team together where we had someone who was doing Twitter and really replicating, what you see on the award shows, like making that something like tangible. Because as many of you know, you might have an idea that you pitch and it's going to work because you've done it before, but then for the client or for the organization, it's something new for them. So just the energy of the adrenaline rush, I should say, of putting that together and then actually seeing it come to life, and that it was something that we would, put our stake in history, that we were the first ones to do that for them. But then also that it was able to bring a younger demo that is now they know about MLK weekend, but for them to actually get the history and to be able to use the technology in it, that was just that's one of those highlights for me of being able to pull that together and bringing just new people to making them building bridges. So all of that, it just covers all my core values. So that was probably one of the most fun and exciting projects that I worked on from an innovative perspective. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Mitch Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. Oh, I guess it's for me. It says, Bill, there's a rumor you're getting a new computer this month. What is it and how do you intend to use it? Yes, that is true.
Go ahead, Bill.
Limping along with an Intel MacBook Pro, which has been fabulous. I've gotten, the value I've gotten out of that, because I've had it for almost 3 years, back a little more than 3 years, and it's worked fabulously, but it was time to rev. I couldn't wait any longer, so I ordered an M2 Max laptop with, let's see, it's got 12-core CPU, 30-core GPU, 16-core neural engine, 64 gigs of memory, because I don't really need more than that, because I'm using NVMEs attached to it for any extra stuff, and that I find is a little more flexible. I probably should have bit the bullet, but there was a big bump in price between that and the next level of memory, and so on and so forth. So it should be here somewhere around in the last week of the month. It's coming, I guess, build to order from China, so it's going to be here around the 28th or something.
Exciting.
So, new toys.
We look forward to that. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What challenges do home workers over the age of 65 face, and how can they position themselves to make the most of the job market, and what are the opportunities?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Lots of questions there, maybe a whole show, in fact. I would think the number one thing in this area is the technology. is understanding how to look good virtually. And so anything any of us can do who have skills to help people work out how to get a better picture, better sound, I see that when I interview people, it makes a huge difference. And I think there's a lot more opportunities to work from home. There's a lot more opportunities to work virtually. But we've got to make sure people have the access and the skills and the technology to make them look as good as anybody else.
And Kenn?
Nigel nailed it. It's about if you can look good on screen, if you can look good on Zoom, that will take you a long way there. A professional setup, a professional look, you will kind of command the room. So that's what I would focus on.
It sounds like there could be a consulting area for folks, because I know even during the pandemic, just even having to communicate with my parents and trying to help them get through that's a whole space in and of itself, as Nigel said. And speaking of space, producers, feel free to go ahead and to submit your questions for us on this Juneteenth holiday here in the US, and then let's get into those questions.
Next one's from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. Again, this time Mitch asks, can we talk a bit about Saturday's new show featuring accessibility awareness and etiquette?
Alex.
I think it was really groundbreaking. I think that there was a lot of stuff that we were trying to, we had to come together with. We had a couple different hosts or a couple different guests that were coming in. We had never had a deaf panelist. So we had deaf panelists as well as ASL that were part of it. So the panel, and what I was amazed by was how smoothly that worked. Like I was like, oh, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I think that, but I was really excited about trying. So I was very like, we're going to do it anyway. And I just thought it was kind of a magical morning. Like it was really, we were able to talk about some of those issues. We were able to work it out. I think the back end team did an incredible job of getting people ready to go, of making the changes that were required, because we had the stream had an ASL window. It's the first try. We're going to keep on working on making it even look better than it did, but it was very clean. It worked very well. The show was very seamless, and I was really happy with the result.
Harshid.
I'm going to give it back to the producers. Mitchell has produced this question as well for us. The producers ran the show, right? And I love that we had our guests on, and we showed that there's a group of people that might be in the hearing loss position. They might be in the vision loss position. Mobility, there's so many variants of disabilities, and having that conversation together and making sure that we're bringing the next best thing on the table with office hours, I think was the element that put everything together. Everyone was a little afraid with the topics, but again, we all want to strive for the same thing at the end of the day, is to have access as everybody else is having access to the same information. So I think that we really ran a good show. Everything was really nice and smooth, and conversationally we got to learn from each other. And the title might have not been depicting the exact thing that you might wanted from it with the etiquette part, but it was the etiquette if you look at the bigger picture, because we all were able to have a conversation together and nobody was left behind.
And Mitchell.
Yeah, I want to plus one what Harshid just said, and of course what Alex said. It was a mind expanding experience for me. I'm sorry to say that it wasn't something I normally would go and listen to, but because I was reading, I was there, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So my recommendation to anybody to take advantage of the fact that for the next 7 weeks or so, here's a chance for you to learn something about another world that you may not know exists, and to be a better citizen in it.
And Alex.
Yeah, one of the things that we're going to be doing, in addition to just having great guests on talking about every different aspect that we can find in the next 7 weeks of accessibility, we're going to also be experimenting with how do we make the show itself more accessible. So it's a bit of a lab for us. It's an incubator. We hope to keep on doing the show either weekly or monthly after we finish the summer. So this is really us sprinting forward and trying to figure out over the next couple of weeks how to do it. And I thought that we started out way better than I expected. Like it was just a lot of changes to our pipeline, and so I think that it's going to be a great summer on Saturdays.
It looked really good. And also just knowing this format for the past 3 years, and then to see different people that have not necessarily been on the panel previously being able to participate, it was exhilarating. Yeah.
I think that one of the things that's really interesting is that we I think that the Makana made it a lot easier as well, because our panelists were able to read the questions. They were able to be they were able to have something to refer to. They were able to raise their hands. So there wasn't. I think that there was an issue there that I hadn't thought of the advantage of getting everybody on that playing field was I think really useful. And so I think that and I think we're already thinking about things like, how do we stream in 9:16 with the interpreter below and the person speaking above, and I think that we're going to think about different formats as well.
And Jason?
Yeah, just abstractly, it occurs to me that technology has this promise of democratization of information, and it is incumbent upon us to like actually be sure that it gets to fulfill its promise.
Well, and the only thing I'll say there is that I don't think most people, when you're doing these, you're adding this to an already built production, and very few companies have the time or money, or they don't expend that to try to figure out how to take it to the next level. And so one of the things that we're hoping to do is use these 8 weeks and then go into next year. How do we keep on just turning that volume up? Like, how do we make it, figure out the best way to do these, and what are the best practices, and potentially build a show that incorporates all of those at one time, multiple languages and audio description and ASL and all the things that would make it interesting. And I think that that's going to be an interesting challenge for us. And I think we're pretty excited about it. I'm really excited that we took it on.
Next question.
Cindy Drozda of Erie, Colorado is up next. I want a live stream from an in-person wood-turning trade show. I need a browser for Streamyard, front and back cameras, a mic and in-ear for me, and a mic for the interviewee. The iPad would work if I could get 2 mics in and a speaker out. Any ideas?
Go ahead, Alex.
So you can get 2 mics in and a speaker out. I don't know if that's the way I would do it, but you can make that actually work. Using the USB-C that's at the back, if you have a USB-C, and even if you have a Lightning, you can make it work. You can work with an external interface. So many of the USB-based external interfaces, the one that we've used in the past has been the MixPre. It's a very expensive one, not MixPre, but the USB Pre 2. This is the one that we use mostly for this. But there's many less expensive ones that are usable. I just don't know how to dial them in. But they have the MixPre 2, for instance, has 2 outs and 2 ins. You can definitely have multiple mics going in, multiple audio going out, and there's many interfaces, probably sub $300 that you can get. A lot of times you want them to be powered separately so that they're not pulling power from your iPad, but that should get you the audio in and out. I would strongly consider, given what you're doing, really thinking about considering things like a Link 360 or OBSBot or something where you have little PTCs that you can kind of move around and look around. But as a really quick setup, I think that the iPad would work well.
And then Mickey just said in the chat, why would you need a speaker out? Will you be interacting with others? If so, use in-ears, not open speakers.
I agree with that.
Next question.
Khalid Al-Jimaya in Hassa, Saudi Arabia. Hey guys, have you seen the camera motion system from PT4, the Expo, AXIBO.com? This is something you may be interested in. The company will also release an affordable robot arm by the end of this year called the E-JIB Mini. And he's got a link to that, AXIBO.com.
Courtney, your thoughts?
Well, I took a look at it on their website. It looks like if you're looking for repeatable moves, maybe it will do that. It seems to be battery powered. It has these little Sony batteries over here on the right side. It's designed primarily for a pretty lightweight camera, so a DSLR or at most maybe a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema. And I suppose it does repeatable. It does have a slider that's available for it, so it looks like you could slide a couple of feet like that on it. For something doing motion control, depends on what you're doing. I think it'd be great maybe for tabletop photography of food, if you're a food photographer doing a lot of getting some motion into tabletop photography. It'd be good for that. I don't know. I'd be afraid to show up on the set and they would say, oh, I have this great robotic camera. Can you put the teleprompter on it? No, it's not going to work for something like that. And of course, it's going to be moving. And I'm not sure exactly. I didn't see any type of connections with the camera as far as controlling. It has an outboard zoom and focus package for it. It's very much piecemeal. You start with the basic package and you add, remote focus, remote zoom, remote control of the lens. I don't know if you have remote control of the camera itself with monitoring and everything else on it, which is usually required for a robotic repeatable remote camera, so that you don't have to touch the camera, because you can knock it off if you're trying to do repeated moves. You could easily upset the position of it because it's such lightweight and so small.
Alex?
Yeah, as they've done development, this has come up a couple times in office hours, so we'll see if we can get them on. I think that it's a really interesting product. It's kind of in some of the DJI stuff that does similar things, and this one looks pretty robust. We've used a lot of these for mostly product shots, and we do it live oftentimes, because if we've done a couple where we did a launch of an item, and we pre-program all the places that camera has to be to show different parts of that item. And oftentimes we're animating both the camera as well as a turntable that sits underneath that item. So that the item rotates to where it needs to go, the panel, and then they can sit there and draw on it or talk about it. And so for those kinds of operations, it can work. My big question will be is how does it interact with external controls? So can I make it part of a system, or is it remote? Is the remote kind of closed? So being able to take external things would be interesting to me. But it does look like a pretty robust and a pretty slick camera. So I'm definitely interested in seeing if we can get those guys on.
Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas, up again. The Tour de France cycling event is coming in July 1st for 3 weeks. What are the best ways to watch it and get the inside scoop on the teams, riders, and the behind-the-scenes stuff?
Go ahead, Ken.
You asked for the best. The best way is the way I'm going to be doing it. We'll go to motorhome RV. You have to go the night before for the stage because they closed that road off, and watch it live, which I'll be doing. And we have a Starlink, and then you can watch it on TV, so you can see the rest of the tour. So that's the best way to do it.
Mitchell?
Yeah, it's quite the spectacle. We did our version of Tour de France here called Tour DuPont in Wilmington, Delaware, and there's so many moving parts to it. One of the things is a place called Monkey Hill, which any Tour DuPonter or Tour de France person would know. It's a Belgian block, very steep hill that I can see right from where I'm sitting right now. And that was where most of the exciting moments happened. But it definitely requires, like Ken said, some type of multimedia enhancement, because it's so big in so many places with so many interesting moving parts. You need a little bit of both. And I guess that makes it a hybrid event.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia. How close are we to finalizing and releasing the updated Fenwick framer? And the most important question of this, how much smaller will our heads need to be?
Alex?
I think that we are, it's up to Chris to when we're going to release the new Fenwick frame. It's his frame. I know that I'm using I use a slightly adjusted version of the Fenwick frame that is smaller. I have submitted it to Chris for his consideration. Mine's about 15% smaller than the current Fenwick frame. I feel like it looks a little bit more natural on a large screen. So the main feedback we got was that when you're watching us on a full 65-inch, 70-inch TV, that many of our heads looked unnaturally large, and so there was a request to make it look a little closer to TV. So that's exactly why we're making some of those adjustments right now. And so I needed to make another guide other than the Fenwick frame for some clients, so that we could normalize their heads at that slightly smaller size. And so I have submitted it to Chris for his approval and his submission. But I have a slightly different framer that I'm using. That's, again, about 15% smaller than the current one.
Go ahead, Bill.
When it goes smaller, mark my words, people will still start leaning in. It's a factor called noggin creep that is just very disturbing.
Next question. Go ahead.
I mean, the thing is it's just like what we need is like this little what we need is to have an app, a Zoom app that pulses red when you lean in. It just goes, you know, like you,
Noggin creep.
You
Noggin
see people go
creep.
like this,
Noggin
but it's like tapping a wall. It's like dunk, and then you pull back a little bit, and then you lean in again, and so that's going to be the next thing. Yeah.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Recently, there was a test where a remote A1 mixed a TV show with 175 milliseconds latency. Wouldn't that be excessive with shows, particularly music shows, where the mix changes quickly? And he's got a link to the test.
Courtney?
And probably not. That's only about 3 frames, 3.5% of the next frame. I got used to mixing, listening off a tape playback off of a Nagra, which was, 3.5 inches per second. That's about 1 second delayed. So that's kind of difficult to mix multiple microphones at that. So I got fairly good at anticipating when to do a mix. And you want to gradually do crossfades and so on. So 175 milliseconds is probably, you can deal with that as long as you're not having to talk live into the mix itself.
Alex?
It's a little long for precision work, but I think that as Courtney said, you could definitely make that work in many shows. We have to remember that most of the time the mixes are, if it's rehearsed, are going to be the mix for a music event is going to be pre-mixed pretty close, and it depends on what the content actually is. But they don't have to make that many split decisions, and usually you don't want to make fast moves anyway, if you're doing it. So those kind of, a mere, again, it depends on the 30 frame or 60 frame, but it's either 3 or 6 frames of delay. I don't think would be that big of a deal. A lot of times when we work on it, they were using VPN over a private network. If we do remote mixing, we use private fiber, the switch or something like it. And then that allows us to cut that latency a little more than half of that.
And Javier?
And I think like music shows or like concerts or like musicals, all of that stuff where you have something with a part scripted, or in this case, like in a show, you know exactly when the song gonna start, and if there is a solo, and if there is something you have to go up or down, you're not reacting that much. You're more like anticipating, like a musical, like a Broadway musical. You could like actually do it just like reading the partiture, like just you can like learn to do it with the delay won't be that hard. Maybe in something that's like unscripted and you have to react quickly, that may be harder. But something where you have like music or something that has like a structure, you can anticipate a lot of things.
And pulling in from the comments, Mickey says, it depends if the show has live music and what type of music it is. I've successfully mixed shows with EDM performances remotely. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul asks, or notes, Reddit is in meltdown. What are the dynamics of this?
Nigel.
So early on in my office hours life, I heard the phrase, if you're not paying, then, if you're the user, then I just messed that all up. But you know what I'm trying to say, that if it's free, then you're the product. Yes. If it's free, then you're the product. And I think the reality that's come to bear, and some of this happens after Elon took over Twitter, and I don't want to argue rights or wrong there, it's just the fact of life, that Silicon Valley finally hit the reality that having followers does not mean having money. And at some point, these services have to pay for themselves, because just an overinflated share price or value is not going to get you there. And I think this is particularly germane to AI, as we're talking about. There's so many free services today that if you rely on them and you don't pay for them, at some point, either you are the product or they won't be there.
Alex?
Yeah, I think that when people complain about companies taking a percentage of their sales, they should remember that companies then value them. They value that. Right now, Reddit wasn't making any money off of all the third parties, and so as a result, they just didn't really care about them. And so I think that that's the real problem there. Reddit isn't. I think that Apollo and other apps like that are really just collateral damage. What Reddit wants to do is get paid by OpenAI. Like they want money from the AI folks to do that, and so they're charging the number that they want because they know that OpenAI and other people building those models really need Reddit. Like they need that access to that on an ongoing basis for them to build their models because there's so much knowledge floating around in it. And so I don't think that it has anything to do with, I think the reason they're not negotiating with anybody is because they know they can probably get that number from AI companies because the AI companies are flush with money and that their data is very valuable. So I think that that's probably why they're going down that path. I think like many things, I think we need to watch to see if they're really in a meltdown. You know, a lot of people when Twitter made its changes said, I'm going to Mastodon. I don't really see a lot of people talking about Mastodon now. And a lot of people like me were just like, sure, let's see how this goes. You know, like, and it was just kind of like, I'll just see what happens. And no one's using Mastodon. I mean, some people are using, a handful of people are using it, but it's not going to take over like it, you know, and so I think that that's the other thing that we see is that moving people out of a social network is pretty complicated. Now, the real danger that they have, that I think that Reddit has, is they've ruptured their relationship, and Twitter has done this as well with their users. So the stickiness of their users, while the users haven't gone anywhere, they're ready to go somewhere. Like, you know, like they're ready to jump. So you're now in a situation where you don't have you know, kind of a really excited, someone that's really excited about your brand. It's a dangerous place to be. You can ask MySpace how that turns out. So, you know, so if something else comes out that's better, they have both Reddit and Twitter have a lot of users that are ready to go somewhere. They just don't know where that is yet. And so that creates a lot of opportunity for, you know, newcomers.
Bill?
Yeah, the services that rely on emotional capital, which is kind of how I see Reddit and a lot of those volunteer-run organizations, when you scale up that big, there's so much instability. And I think Alex is exactly right about this. I mean, you know, when you're working for just karma points, which are ephemeral and don't really have any actual value, it's really easy for people's emotions to get in the way. I've had a couple of circumstances where on Reddit, people moderators just screamed at somebody for something that they were doing, and you'd never do that in a workplace where there was any kind of economic balance in the way, you know, you could lose your work. Well, if you're a volunteer, there's only the social construct and the contract that keeps you there, keep you doing things, and so it has to be carefully managed, and that's really hard to do at scale over millions of people.
And I wanted to just expound a little bit on what Alex said when he said that they're really potentially looking to cash in from OpenAI. And what he means by that is that it was maybe like a month or so ago that Reddit said, hey, you know what? You need to start paying because that community, people are going there to learn how to use ChatGPT, the latest prompts, and all of that knowledge that's taking place there, that they're looking at, okay, we've created this space and that, yes, now we need to actually monetize it. So just putting more context to it there. Next question.
Mitchell Hill, Wilmington, Delaware. Flash is dead. Long live Flash. For those of us who have been coding websites for a long time, do you miss any of the long gone Flash features? CSS has limited animation capabilities.
Ken?
In a word, no. We developed a lot of Flash apps. We use it mainly for the programming aspect of it. The animations were the most annoying thing. And thank goodness, and CSS has limited them. I think it's got too many in CSS even. So yeah, animations. The fact that their Flash is gone is a good thing, because once a user maybe they see it once, they might smile. They see it a second time, they get bored. See it a third time, and they might not come back. It's animations and all the moving bits and pieces that people put on websites is. I won't go on, because I can talk about this forever. But yeah, thank goodness it's gone.
I agree. I don't miss Flash at all. Mitchell?
Well, I thought there were some lessons that can be learned from it. I'm a graphic, motion graphics guy, and I liked it for that. And then I learned ActionScript 1, then I learned ActionScript 2, and then, you know, the Steve Jobs inevitability happened. I got tired of it very quickly, too, as Ken points out. But, you know, like a seasoning, if it was used right, it worked well. When I try to accomplish the same thing with CSS or HTML5, I find it's a bit more challenging. And it's
Can
almost
you give
as
us
if
an
it's
example? Like when you would try the same thing, like try what?
When you move things around the screen as well as you could with Flash, you have very limited programmatic ways of doing that in CSS. You can do it, but you can't do animation loops and fly things around quite as easily. You can do it, but not as easily. So perhaps what it did do, which is great, is that it reduced the number of people that would attack a website with a huge number of Flash animations, which I agree, it got tiresome, especially after the first or second or third iteration. But I was hoping that there was something that we could borrow from that Flash decade and apply it to today.
Courtney?
I don't miss it. I don't miss the websites where you go to that website and it just puts up a still image and you go, well, where's the information? And you have to roll your mouse, go spelunking and roll your mouse around until you find the Flash animated animation for one area of the photo that activates something. So that I don't miss at all, and all the animated annoying rollovers and trying to figure out how the interface works because every single one of them was different. I don't miss that. The only thing that it did do really well is it scaled because it was vector based, so you could scale it to any resolution, which was a problem in designing websites when everything had to be 800 by 600 because that was the medium resolution that most people had at the time. So you'd end up with tiny websites in a big area if they had full HD resolution, but Flash could scale up and scale down without getting chunky or looking bad. You could scale it down to postage stamp size and still have clickability on it. The targets would scale down as well. So that was the one good thing about Flash, but I don't miss it.
And Alex?
Yeah, I think that the hard part is that web designers are kind of like event people, like what we do, is that we do things that entertain ourselves. We don't think about people coming to it over and over and over again sometimes. So sometimes, what you see on TV and what you see on live streams are things that the creators of those, they've gotten bored with whatever is out there and they're looking for the next thing and they're building it, but they're not really tying themselves back to the use of the page, which is to deliver the information about the product or the idea. And I think that there is this balance. And I think Flash lost that thread a long time ago. And so a lot, people just got into all the tools that you could use and made them crazy. Like I know that if I go to, this isn't Flash, if I go to a site that it's got all those layers and those big images and rolls up, which includes Apple, I just go somewhere else. Like I'll find the information somewhere else. I can't find it there now. Like they've, in a lot of places, they've added so many things to the website to make it look quote unquote flashy, that it takes me too much time to grok the information. And so I look for the information now, oftentimes not on product websites because they made them so complicated, but on B&H or something like that. I just need to find the spec page, and I think that a company that has done it actually fairly well is Blackmagic. Does a pretty good job of their products. I can find the information I need from their products. It's a pretty website. It looks nice. It has lots of information, and I can find my way around it and get what I need out of it relatively quickly. I think that a lot of companies miss that usefulness.
And Ken?
Yeah, I must echo what Alex said. A lot of website designers design a website for another website designer to show off. So few are focused on what the actual customer wants and them getting that piece of information. And just to Courtney was saying about scalability. If you want scalability, you can use a SVG file. Scales is a vector-based, and it's you can program that, and it's programmatic, and so you can use SVG files or images which are perfectly scalable. So that's the way you get to that. There's nothing that Flash had or that was any good that you can't do well with CSS and SVG files.
Next question.
Paul Wallace, Austin, Texas. More companies are looking for ChatGPT and AI experts. At the same time, they're trying to cut jobs elsewhere. Discuss.
John?
It's nothing more than a reshuffling of priorities now. The opportunities in AI, especially in the enterprise spending space, is projected to be in the hundreds of billions in the next 5 years. So significant movement therein, and there's tons of opportunities. Reminds me of when transcription moved from typewriters into word processors, and those people that accepted the technology moved forward were given new jobs. So that's all that's going on right there.
Sky.
I've heard the term in HR called right sizing, and I think that's a similar concept here as John just mentioned. How do we repurpose the energies that the individuals have with these new tools? And consequently, I know people are often looking for the silver bullet, but again, the best phrase I've ever heard is what we really need is silver buckshot.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's important is for us to keep as people, whether we're producers or not, we want to look at this as a lesson in we should be paying attention to the new technologies that are coming out and figuring out how we embrace them, not how we say, well, that shouldn't happen, because that's rarely what happens. Like saying that we're going to stop it is kind of is a difficult thing. So I think that we need to keep on figuring that out. Definitely in every industry, you see this all the time with automation. And I think the interesting thing is the upset right now is because the automation is white collar jobs instead of blue collar jobs. We've been using automation to replace blue collar jobs for the last 100 years. And whole divisions get wiped out and we don't think much of it. And it doesn't really show up like, oh, well, there's a whole bunch of robots at the Ford thing, and that those were used to be people. And so we don't think much of it. But when it's white collar jobs, everyone's really in panic mode. So I think that we should also check ourselves a little bit when it comes to thinking about how automation affects this process. I do think it's very important. It will change the way we look at education. I think most of education was just proving that you could survive it. And so then you get out and then we'd actually train you on what you needed to do. You're going to have to come out at 22 years old or maybe 18 years old as a near expert in your field. This changes the requirements of public school and of universities. You're not going to be able to go to a public schools need to now, or not be public schools, but something needs to train students so that they are at a very high proficiency when they leave high school. Universities are not going to be places that you can go and party and survive the next, the rest of your career. It is going to be an intense thing to be ready. And then people are going to need to think about educating themselves every day for the rest of their lives to stay ahead of, AI and all the other opportunities there. And that's just the cost of that process. And so there's a lot of opportunity, but there is a lot of cost. The upside of that is the people who are doing that are going to get paid a lot because they're doing the things that the AI can't.
Courtney?
Yeah, this has become a point of contention in the bargaining that's going on now between the Writers Guild of America and the producers, and that the Writers Guild wants to outlaw the producers from using large language model generative AI to replace them. But they also want to still be able to use AI to help them when they've got writer's block or when they need to finish, take a creative direction in a script story. It can come up with a different creative idea, which they can then elaborate on. So they want it and then they don't want it. They don't want the producers to have access to it, but they want to have access to it. And it's become kind of a stumbling block in the negotiations.
Bill?
So I came out of the business world kind of with one thing in the back of my mind. The three big costs of operating business: you got capital costs in the beginning, you've got operating costs, day-to-day stuff, but the last one and the monster is labor costs. It is probably the most controllable level. If you think Wall Street really needs you to be more profitable, cutting headcounts is the fastest way to show that on the bottom line. And it always struck me that as AI and these things come in, one of the unintended consequences may be that as more and more businesses get automated, those control levels aren't going to be there. So people are going to have to shift their attention to something else. If you've replaced removable headcount in the form of people with machines, where are the levels for moving profit for a short-term period of time to meet goals? Are you going to have one? It's going to be an interesting change.
Jason?
This question invites us to tumble headfirst down the rat hole, after, therefore, because, right? Post hoc, ergo propter hoc. Just because one thing happens and the other thing happens doesn't mean that one causes the other. I think that the American and better yet, the world's job and labor market is always going to be in a series of ebb and flow and flux. And, this is just kind of the next big thing occurring as another thing happens.
And pulling in a comment here, John says, when cars were invented, there were a lot of new mechanic jobs posted and few carrier drivers, which goes back to what John said earlier, John Preto said earlier about the reshifting of priorities. And I think a part of the conversation, the good part of the conversation is the reskilling part and helping people to get up to speed, helping people to understand. And even as Alex mentioned, even with the education system is helping people how to think, working alongside these tools and resources. I say to my daughter all the time, and this is before this AI part of things, but I would always say when she would ask me a question or something would come up, I would say, well, how are you going to solve that problem? Because I understand the need to be able to be strategic and to problem solve. Like that is something that is going to take her no matter what industry she's in. So those are the kinds of things when we have these conversations. Well, how can we help people to prepare so that they're able to be a part of this as opposed to that being something that takes them out? Next question.
Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael. I've heard of industrial robots like those from ABB used for media applications. Would there be any advantage to industrial robots in our industry with appropriate software like RobotAnimator?
Alex?
I've definitely seen this in a variety of motion control arms. In fact, a lot of motion control arms, the newer ones, were based on industrial arms that were coming out of factories. And so, because they're a lot less expensive to build them and fairly precise. The last time I saw one in person was actually when I was in Cape Town in South Africa. And there was a team there, I think it's called Black Cricket, that was doing 3D. And what it did is it had to do a move. And so they were doing stop motion animation. And what it would do is it would swing down and take a photo and then take the stereo pair with it. So it'd go, and it would do it again, and it would keep on doing it. And they had it all pre-programmed to make all those things work. And it was really, really effective. And so, but they were using, it wasn't even dressed up. It was a arm from a car factory that they had reprogrammed. So there's definitely some use there.
Bill?
I looked at their website, and I was interested to see a term that I hadn't seen before, which was cobots. And so they are, one of their areas of interest is figuring out how to make robots that work alongside a person to improve their ability to do repetitive tasks and things like that without entirely taking the human out of the equation. That was interesting to me. I wonder how many of us will be working next to robots as opposed to being replaced by them.
Next question.
Robert Sababati, I'm sorry if I got that wrong, from Poland. What mics do you use to capture ambient sound in a conference room when you run hybrid events, and where do you place them?
Alex?
I think it depends on what you mean by conference room. So if you're talking about a conference room that is in if you're talking about a conference room that's a traditional like office conference room, we try not to have any ambient mics because we have enough trouble with the audio already. If you're talking about a large event center and you're doing those, we've done those in a couple different ways. Shotguns have been the most, like 416s have been probably the thing that we've used the most on. And usually we either build an XY that is in the center to get kind of a field, or we put them on the corners. That has been one way that we've done those. The other way that we've done them is also we've actually used even lav mics and put them on the backs of the confidence monitors, or I think in Europe they call them comfort monitors. But they have those boxes there, and we've put them in there, and what we get is what you would hear from the stage in those areas, and both of those have been fairly effective at bringing it up. We do like to have everything on the stage as directional as possible so that we can fade that in and out as we want to, but it is important for the larger events because otherwise jokes or anything that they thought was funny feels like it just dropped off into dead air if you don't have some of those ambient mics out there.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Summarize how you get set up on the office hours with camera, comms, audio, video, and lighting background for a typical show. How long does it take you to get ready?
Yes, let's go with the summaries. Ken?
When I was back in my studio, about 30 seconds because I have everything fixed and set. When I'm in my RV, as I am today, it can take a lot longer because there's this thing called the sun and it moves around and it adjusts the things. I don't know how you cope with those. You can't block out the sun to do the lighting. But yeah, normally about 30 seconds in the studio and quite a bit longer when I'm mobile.
Nigel?
Yeah, so I tend to power off my studio at night, everything except the network. So I turn on, I wait for my machines to come up, and then I really press two buttons. I press one to turn the lights on, I press another multifunction on my Stream Deck that starts everything else, and then I do the color correction on the camera, and I'm set up for my working day.
Mitchell?
I kind of like the therapeutic idea of turning a lot of things on and off. I mean, I have a standing Zoom set. The thing that helps a lot is having this little NAND-link remote for the lighting and a Furman over here that powers up my ATEM and cameras. So it's pretty quick, 15 seconds.
Jason?
Having just survived the move, I made this as simple as I possibly could. It's pretty much 2 or 3 buttons, and this is the new studio as it stands right now. So it's 3 buttons tops, and that's it.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. One of the arguments I've heard against learning iOS development is that, quote, all of the unemployed programmers will get first crack at the jobs. Would there be other sustainable employment models for mobile development? And he specifically mentions freelance and contract work.
Courtney?
Well, mobile development is a curious place because you can have apps that are fairly simple that a single person writes from beginning to end and publishes on the App Store. So that's one form of entry into that particular area, and you're not really competing against anybody, but it's your idea and your concept. Now, if you're just working as part, on a big multiplayer game, for example, companies will hire contract players just to finish a game, especially if they have a deadline. They've announced a product and they have to get it out by summer, et cetera. They will hire part-time programmers to fill in to help get the game across the finish line. So there is a market for freelance programmers that are hired on a project-by-project basis, but there may not be a lot of longevity at that, and you may have to be constantly searching for your next job. So finding a permanent job, programming job, can be difficult unless you're part of the firm, an owner of the firm, or a starter of the firm that does it.
And Alex?
Yeah, I think it's getting harder and harder as an entry level to find a place to go, because you're really competing. When people want entry level programmers, there's a lot of places in the world to choose that they're going to pay the same amount of money and have someone that's very advanced at what they do. There's places called TopTal is probably the one that is used the most for that. I think that if you're going down that path, I do think that iOS is a pretty good one to look at. Only because, as Courtney said, you have your own ability. The iOS apps tend to be more profitable. It's just harder to do a profitable Android app right now. So that's why I'd probably lean towards, if you're doing mobile development, leaning towards it. Most people who want to make profit will start at iOS and then move over. Android does a lot of things, and people do have a lot of great apps, and the Android platform is thriving. But it's most of it's advertised based, or they're looking for other ways to generate revenue other than selling it. So I think that you may find that the iOS development is good. And you also have, again, we're going to keep on coming back to the AR headset. But the AR headset is a green field. And so as a programmer, you want to really look at that, because you're going to have a bunch of people that paid, probably hundreds of thousands of people that paid a lot of money for a headset, and they're going to be trying to fill it with something. So getting good at those platforms over the next couple of years will be interesting.
All right. We are now at the top of the hour, getting ready to talk about AI and content creation. Thank you, producers, for all of your great questions. As our panel gets ready I feel like this is going to be a bit of a show and tell segment as we get into it, because our community, a great part of Office Hours is sharing our knowledge, sharing the projects that we're working on, sharing how we use them. And as content revolves in every aspect, whether that be your pitch decks and your proposals, or sending things to clients, or you're actually at the end user and you're actually creating podcasts or reels. We'll see someone is going to share talking about YouTube Shorts. For the next hour, we are going to answer your questions and share our processes. And I would like to start off with Descript is one of the tools that we're using. We've been using it since late last year, but much more heavily now. And we use Descript in the way for our clients creating audiograms for them, or even from like cutting out elements from their podcast so that they can use that on social. But I started a challenge now, personally, how I am using it right now. And I'll just get ready for the backend team. I'm going to screen share here so that you can see. I started a challenge last week to use ChatGPT as my social media manager. So I put in prompts each day, go through scripting with ChatGPT to see if I can get from, I think I started at roughly 226 followers on my Create with Liberty account, and using ChatGPT to help me with strategy, to help me with, to actually tell me based on the data that I provide, tell me what to do. And each day we're posting videos of that. So this is using Descript. And as you'll see here, we had Kevin O'Connell on a few months ago to just talk to us about it. And the reason why we chose Descript is, one, multiple people could be in this project file for the times when I might not be able to get back and complete something. But I'll show you here, just like even we've got like our B-roll, the different music and assets. And what I enjoy about Descript that helps with our workflow is that it has access. Like, we don't need to necessarily go out and go get, animated GIFs. The back end already has a lot of imagery. So if I want to put in that, I think one of our recent ones was talking about Adobe Firefly. So I needed to find, it was like a woman on computer. Oops. Because I wanted to show something with her. Okay, these may definitely not the grade. This is images, but then getting videos so that I could pop them in for, from a B-roll perspective. And what Descript does really well, what I enjoy about it most is just like even the captions. So if I were, hopefully the sound won't come through, but let me see. I think, okay, it's muted, so it won't come through, I think. Did you hear that? Did that come through? Okay, awesome. Thank you.
I did not hear it.
Perfect. So just even, being able to follow the format of how, TikTok or stories can be put in, but just being able to customize it. And one of the things that the captions even are more so branded for, you'll see the yellow and the fuchsia. That's a lot of the color that just using from a brand perspective. But one of the things that I also enjoy here is, instead of actually cutting out a part of the video and then actually having to go back in. So you'll see this strike through that happens right here. So let's say as I was doing the rough cut, then I don't know if that's necessarily the best take. Well, then I could come in here, and then you see the strike through. That's basically ignore. So if I were to play this out, that entire section is gone. And so I don't necessarily lose it and then have to go back. If I was in Adobe Premiere, maybe I would have duplicated a timeline because I didn't want to lose that version of my edit. But here I can strike through. And then if I play it, I'm like, you know what? That actually worked a lot better. Then I can just go in and reignite it, get it back so that it works really well. So just Descript has been a fantastic tool. And then also being able to just like share the link out with others so that they're able to then, okay, can you quickly review? Can you look at it from a client perspective? If this or any other project, we would be able to send it to the client and they can actually put the comments on there. And so Descript is one of the ways that it's just been a great resource for us in using it with the auto captions. I haven't done too much overdub yet, which is basically where you would pull somebody, you capture, I believe it's about 10 minutes that you would have to take their voice, put it into the script. So then now what you're able to do is you can write a script and then use overdub. So the person doesn't actually have to be there because you already have their voice. And then it can actually, read the script, and there you've got, a podcast episode, however you have it. So just one of the ways that it just makes the workflow so much faster. Sky?
I was very fortunate to be a part of a large presentation for directing a presentation for a company. And we use the iterative process of coming up with a backdrop. Now, I was working with a designer that was doing a video projection on the big 1x1 LED panels. And so we came up with a dozen different ideas, as was mentioned earlier, in a very short amount of time. And again, also, we were very fortunate because it was the concept, the theme was going back in time to the original iterations of 8-bit graphics. So early days of MidJourney had some very simplistic images already in its database. So we pulled on that, but then incorporated that in the big video wall back behind. I have, is sharing a screen available?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yes, you can share screen.
Let me see if I can make that happen for us. Why is it not happening?
That's really neat, though, to just be able to, how you can quickly just, come up with oh, that looks awesome, Sky. Go ahead and talk us through this. So are you saying that where was this created?
Well, the designer was in Los Angeles and I'm here in Seattle. It was for an office in San Francisco, and that is a video wall background, but it was again repurposed in the boxing of the 8-bit design concept. And then he also created what he called L brackets off to the side, which were again another design, and then 2 large projection screens on the left and the right for the audience. So this was used both for presentation, but also as a design concept. So throughout a 2-day event, the backdrop changed multiple times to go again with the different themes with the different speakers. Now, we took the original MidJourney and then he took it into his After Effects and created additional moving elements in here. So that logo in the middle would spin and flip, and then the lights would transition up in through that original still image, created a 3D, video image.
And with what you just shared, Sky, it really does show the power of using these tools in addition to your regular, creative process, as in like that being the first step of just getting some thoughts out and getting it together. And then here's the expert being the designer in this case that was able to add more of the bells and whistles and actually customize it. Is that what I heard?
Yes. And again, the client is looking to you to bring them something cool, something fun, something unique. And that iterative process was minutes rather than hours or days going through the creative design concept, because we could just, through the verbiage of throwing words into MidJourney, say, well, let's try it this way. Oh, well, that didn't work. And you'd get iterative choices in a matter of minutes rather than days. So we were able to design multiple options for a client. And again, the challenge was not to show the client everything. That's your job. Narrow it down to the specific, 1 or 2 that you would like to really expand and exploit.
I don't know how long ago this was, but can you talk about like how long did it take with your prompting to get it as close to what you said, okay, this is something that we can share with them? Because that's a part of this conversation that sometimes it's like you don't just put a prompt in and it's like, voila, that's the one that worked. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
With my designer, we spent a morning together, and then we came back the next day. We reviewed it with the initial client, and then that client, of course, has to take it to their boss. And so the iterative process that a year ago would have taken probably a week, I think maybe took 2 days.
Copy that. Kenn, you want to share your process and what you've been working on content-wise and AI, and how it has, this is a word that always comes out in ChatGPT copy, revolutionized your workflow?
Well, for our business, it truly has.
Okay.
We've been using, as soon as we had access, we were using it and utilizing it, but it moves so quickly, things change rapidly. The way, for example, sure, a few examples, but like, for example, we now do YouTube Shorts or any kind of shorts, whether it's for YouTube or for Instagram. For our clients, they normally produce kind of long form videos, and then we would then go in and edit them. We now use Opus. Let me share this screen because I've got a version here which I've gone just with Tony, so I know Tony would be happy to share that. Let me quickly share this. If that's being seen, this is Opus. Opus.pro you go to. What you do is you put in the link to your YouTube video, or you can upload a video file. So you just put that in there and then click on this, and it takes, depending on the length of the video, 10, 15 minutes. It does the process. This is one did for the show I did with Tony. What we particularly like about this application, not just the level of customization, which I'll quickly show you, is that it gives a score for each of the video of the shorts. So you put one in, it produces, we've seen it's about 15 shorts it makes. It scores it, but it gives you the reason for the score, which is a really nice touch. You can also put a branding element around it. That's why, as I said, we've used AI before to help us generate these, as I said earlier. If I was building an application to do it, they built one for me, so it saves us that work. Because what it allows you to do in the edit clip part is the branding part of it, which is a key part for our clients. So, for example, here, this is the caption. This is the caption element where, this is captions that it pulled out, and it colors them, and you can change what colors are being used. The only editing I need to do, because it spelt my name with one N for some weird reason, so I had to just go in and put two N's in, which is the correct spelling of Ken. But this part here, the branding, here is where you can, the auto features that it's already set up with, are really good. There's very little you need to do in terms of changing the defaults, but you can, because it auto positions where the caption is, because it looks at where the face is, and other positions it below or above. All of that's done. The nice bit here, you can load a template, so it gives you a sample one, but you can then customize, and that's what we did for Tony. We've given put a template in. So that's the only really piece that I've added, was made a template framing for it. The rest, but you can, as I said, adjust the fonts, the color, so you can make it fit the client's brand. And yes, put that in, and it then goes off and produces. I said what I like about it is the scoring aspect of this. So it kind of tells you what worked well, why this one ranks this well. So it's so simple and easy to. I did a demo with for Tony and Talak, and so showed them how to do it, and how they're off to the races. They can just do it themselves. It's that simple to use and that quick to quickly get out, because you can have the best channel, do a great have great YouTube videos, but you need to get the audience to them. YouTube massively pushes shorts, so you can use this really quickly. So paste in the URL to your video. This will then produce the shorts that you can then export out. You just download the HD version, upload them to your social channels. Job done.
How accurate has that, like for your other clients that you're using it with, looking at that, sentiment analysis or whatever the terminology that they use? What have you seen with that?
We've seen this to be really good. I mean, for our clients now, this is a process that they'll be back and forth and take time in terms of doing this. We now train our clients on how to use this, and then they can go off, because for them it's it's ease of use and speed that they can get this stuff done and out. And as I said, if I was building one myself, Opus would be what I would have built for them to do it. It just covers all those aspects, and we find it really good on that. What we used to use, and we still do use, there's another program called Munch. What we use this for now is just for the kind of analysis. This gives a kind of a good breakdown on, again, this is the same video. Then it's going whether it's highly searched or this gives a kind of a real-time score on what's trending and whether on how well any clips that you generate and how well they will trend or not. So we use this for analysis. We used to use this for creation, but not anymore. Opus does all that work for us now. But Munch, getmunch.com is a beauty of this one. You can use it for free if you don't want to use the tool to actually generate the video. So I'd use this to it does a really good kind of analysis on what would be, on how popular or not it would be, or how well they reckon it would rank. So as a ranking tool for your short video, then get Munch. But for creation now, everything has changed for us. We use Opus to do that.
Outstanding. Thanks, Ken. Alex?
Yeah, so I use MidJourney for a lot of fun, and I use ChatGPT to produce things. A lot of times, one of the things that's interesting is in the background of some of the shows, I don't use the questions, but I oftentimes ask them like, okay, well, what about this question, like for AI or for something else? I'll ask ChatGPT. Sometimes the questions are pretty competitive, I've been looking at that. One thing I do is I use ChatGPT sometimes to generate prompts for MidJourney. So I say, you're a prompt expert and an artist, this kind of artist, give me a prompt, and it will give me a paragraph, a couple paragraphs of description for MidJourney that I'll just post in there. And sometimes I get something better than what I would do, and sometimes I don't. So I'm still playing with that. The major use that I probably do on a day-to-day basis is I have to build a lot of decks about different concepts and so on and so forth for work. And I use MidJourney to generate images that I want to use, just little concept images. These aren't the technical images. This isn't how we're going to do something, but it gives people some way to think about things. And so my big thing is that I do a lot of things over a plain white background. Like that's what I tell it to do. Like do this over a plain white background. And so what you end up with is something like this is an example of, I was talking about the evolution of media. And so I started, I drew a little line here, and then I have this, we started off, carving things in wood in here, and then we had text, and then we had print, and then we had radio and TV and cable and social, so I'm kind of going through that process. And the main thing is all of those images are all created by MidJourney. So I put those all into, I just ask, so every one of those images, I don't have to figure out, like trying to find all of those images that are lit well over a white background that are just kind of fun and don't have a logo and don't have something else, and I don't have to pay for them. I'm able to build something out that just kind of, and each one of them was probably 50 or 60 iterations that I found the one that I wanted. And that took 10 minutes, which would have taken the amount of time it would have taken me to find it, each image, but it's original and it's not, there. And then I said, oh, and then what's next? Okay. Anyway, then I did, sorry, that's the other end of that slide there. But like I was talking about the evolution of sometimes not a very happy evolution, but school and work and social. Anyway, so I'm talking about those things. All of these images are again on MidJourney, and so I'm building these out as examples of what I want, and they're I find them to be it's just a much nicer way to show things than trying to cobble together something that's there. And I'm oftentimes asking for the same style. Here's another example here. So you can see how that's kind of fun. You just have and then we have people that are confused, and so you have kind of a nice, and this one is, I think I asked for, large eyes and glasses in the style of Pixar, and it just, but if you look at that just really adds a lot of fun to and I've never had so much fun doing, building little things inside of, for my presentations. I mean, that was always a lot of work. And now it's like, it's a little thing you do at lunch while you're, you carve up a bunch of things. Now, I thought I'd show you exactly what I do. So I asked these, I've generated a couple of these, and I had confused, let's see, I think I did confused geeky person. Let's see if I don't know why that didn't show up. Hold on a second here. Let me see. I'm going to go to full screen so I can see what I'm doing. No, because I'm in a, hold on. I figured it out. There we go. So here's how I construct those. So I'll grab, I'll grab something here and I'll pop, here's, a person that's, I'll grab a couple people here because we might want to have layers. And so the problem is you do plain white background and you end up with a lot of extra white. And in Keynote, that's relatively easy to manage. So you go into format and you go into remove background and you go, oh, I just want to get rid of that, right? And then I hit OK, and then I go to the next one, and I say, well, let's go to this other one here, and I say I want to remove that background, and I'll just go, I need to get rid of that. Sometimes you need to worry about the inside. You can also get you can push it a little harder. You'll just lose your shadow if you push too hard. Then I hit OK, and then I have this one, and I remove that background, and I'll go, okay, I need to pull that background out, and I hit OK. Now, once I've done that, I can have them all, I can set them all wherever I want them over top of each other. So now you're building like a little crowd scene that's there, and you can grab these and we can say, like, I would like to animate these and I'm going to give it the anvil, and there it has it as you have kind of a crowd view. Another thing that that you can do is stuff like, I wanted to have, if you look at this one, and then the person's going to be on a stage, and here I have, the character. I probably could have cleaned up the edges a little bit, but you can see I added a reflection to the object that's there as well. So there's a lot of, and all of these are, again, in the style of Pixar. And what I do is I ask for the background and the foreground in the same style, like that, that they're going to be, and so you end up with things that kind of feed into each other. But I do, this is how I build my decks now, because most of mine are conceptual. And then I'll show things that are screens or things that we're going to do. But when I'm describing if I'm doing demonstrative information to get people to think about ideas, it's revolutionized. As Kenn would say, it's revolutionized what he's done. It's really revolutionized what I've done with keynotes because of that. And with the fun animations that you can add, you can really give them, it makes them a lot more interesting to watch when they're fun. And again, trying to find all of those illustrations and have them all feel like they belong together in stock photography would be almost impossible. I mean, you really, you need to, by finding certain styles that I like, and having the entire thing rendered as those styles and being able to adjust them it just makes making documents a lot more fun. Because I make the text that you saw on most of the slides is about as much text as I use for my documents.
What kind of response have you gotten from people just engaging with your presentation?
Sometimes it's a little distracting. So a lot of people love them. I mean, you get these chuckles in the middle of your presentation when you're talking about something and people enjoy it. I've had a couple people say, you probably should just get into the business of doing keynotes, like building decks for people, like,
right.
because I obviously I use a lot of animation, inside of Keynote. And, but mostly what I find is that there's higher engagement. So people are more active listening with this than they are when I'm just showing them. When the old slides just didn't capture their attention long enough. And so when I mix, the other thing that I'm doing that I'm not showing you here is I go back and forth a lot. So I pop into the screen, I pop up on the screen. So I'm going back and forth, and the mixture of me popping in and popping out and these things rolling up and rolling out just really creates a much better presentation than anything I was doing before, and really anything that I normally see people do. And I think that the one thing I will say is that I've become, because of this and because of the way I cut back and forth and everything else, become highly resistant to meeting people in person. Like I can't, like I feel like I'm going to get crippled if I have to actually do a presentation to someone sitting next to me. I'm like, well, okay, this is fine, and it's still fun, but it's not the same as being able to have a whole video production system that allows me to. Because on top of those things, of course, I have my Telestrator, so I sit there and talk about things. I draw on things. I hit open slides. I draw through, and it really makes a much better experience than what we would do. But the MidJourney stuff has been the thing that has really made it a lot of fun. And then, for the non-fun stuff, non-work stuff, I learned that 9:19, the aspect ratio 9:19 is the aspect ratio of my phone. And I do a lot of lock screens. Like when bored, I make lock screens. My current one is a Velociraptor.
Awesome. I'm pulling in this comment from John in the chat saying, pushing specialty work down to generalists is a great use of AI, and Kenn just showed a great example of that. And I wanted to come back to just that idea of how using, or I shared this even on LinkedIn a little while ago, a couple of weeks ago when we had, it was a Monday show, and we had polls, put the polls out, and I'd asked Chad sent the information to me so I could share it on air, but it was like while being on air and needing to get the numbers, he pulled it together in a spreadsheet, and then I quickly just popped it in. Like I was on the side here saying, ChatGPT, what are the percentages, and it just popped it out, and to be able to just use that information so quickly and thinking of ways, and this is what I would challenge our producers, and thinking of ways like how you can incorporate what kind of tasks that you might find that it takes you so much time, just like Sky had shared, because even with the experiment that I'm doing, and I should say a head nod to you, Alex, because when we're here on office hours, it's about building the muscle memory. And so that's why I'm like, okay, for these 30 days, and I'm calling this social media manager #creator GPT. And going in and working through the prompts, and actually we stopped growing for a couple of days. So I sat down and had a conversation, because when you're using ChatGPT, those are the kind of things like thinking of it as you're having a conversation with someone and having the conversation. Okay, we stopped growing. Here's the data from all the reels that we've done. What do you think we should change? And wait, this is really what the ecosystem looks like. Here are the people we're trying to serve. And just by starting right now, you might not necessarily have a client project that you need to do that with just yet, but by getting in, because I think the data, and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's like of the people in the US who do have access to ChatGPT, only, or using AI tool, there's this 14%. I'm gonna have to go quickly look at it, but it's like only 14% of people are using it. So office hours is this space where we're trying new things early so that we can have a stronger idea of how to use it and how to better serve our community. Nigel?
Yeah, I have a comment and then a request. So here's my comment. For work, I have to write quite a lot of text, and I'm a dyspraxic. So I really struggle that my brain and my fingers and my writing are never quite in sync with each other. So one of the things I do is I sort of dump my ideas into Grammarly, and Grammarly does quite a good job of cleaning it up. And then I ask a ChatGPT to copyright it. And I find the combination of those two things, because ChatGPT doesn't mess up my voice particularly, but it does, I'll write model when I meant modal, and I can't always see the difference. So I found the combination of those two very good. I'm also using MidJourney for presentations, although here's my favor. Alex, could you please post somewhere the MidJourney request that gets a logo or an image, on a white background that allows you to do what you just did on Keynote, because I struggle to get the right combination of words together.
I find that it's anything that I say, comma, over a plain white background. And that was a hit and miss thing until 5.1. So 5.1 seemed to, so everything before 5.1, you'd sometimes get it. You'd sometimes get a blue background. You'd sometimes get something else. Sometimes you get a white cyc, which had the shadow in the middle. And now I find that if I ask for over a plain white background, I'm going to get that. And then the main thing is you just want to say all in frame, or you want to say head to toe, and oftentimes I do head to toe, comma, full body. Like, I'm serious. I want the whole person. And MidJourney will still throw a wrench every once in a while, but it does a pretty good job of that. Yeah. Try that, and I think we need to do some labs where we jump on for, we'll figure it out where we do some labs. We had a lot of fun with that for a little while, where we do a half an hour, and we sit around just doing prompts and talking about that. So we'll get those going in the next couple of weeks.
That would be cool. Kenn?
Yeah, just to quickly answer. Also adding the word like a t-shirt design on a white background, because then it knows, something to be cut out. It can now produce vectors, but that's a whole other thing. You can now do vectors as a plugin for it, that you can produce vectors. I love vectors. I use vectors whenever I can. Obviously, flat images is what you can ChatGPT. You can now run and produce.
ChatGPT's doing that, or MidJourney's doing that? MidJourney.
There's a thing for MidJourney. Sorry, MidJourney, where you can get it to and that's only just out. and I've just been playing around with that, and that's been really good. Because trying to trace around an image and stuff like that in Illustrator or something, but now it does a beautiful job, and it exports out as an SVG file. Yeah, changing.
All right, Bill, let's get into these questions.
Absolutely. Our first one comes from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. And his question, since generative AI has become popular, social sites are even more awash with mediocre content. What special sauce do you add to make yours stand out?
Go ahead, Ken.
For example, in a ChatGPT prompt, yes, you can just put in a simple thing and it will produce a simple answer. It really isn't, it's because it's AI, presently, you still have to work at it. I'll just quickly share my screen here just for a second, because I can show you, this is the prompt we use in ChatGPT to get a good image in MidJourney. And you see move on now, sorry, where has it gone? This is just the prompt. I can happy to share that with you, and we use that, and then you put, that's just the prompt. Then all you have to put in is you then put in what you're looking for, and then ChatGPT based on this prompt will then produce something really descriptive. Now, what we've found though with MidJourney 5.1, it's a lot more creative. Which was fine if you weren't creative with your prompt. So we need to, if you're using MidJourney 5.1, we use raw, because then it's less creative, because we want to be the creative part, I'm saying ChatGPT is making us more creative, creates a more creative prompt, more close to what we look for. So we go into MidJourney, we set it to raw, get ChatGPT, I said, using this prompt, which I'm happy to share. And you put in just very simply what you're looking for, it will come up with a really descriptive prompt, and then we paste that into MidJourney, and that we find gets really good results.
Sky?
Right over your shoulder is the answer. Right up there on your bookcase, Liberty. Hard work. There's really no secret sauce to this. And if anything, the trick is to think that hard work is to Alex's point, that's the fun. It really is. So it's in many ways that if you want secret sauce, it's attitude that hard work can be fun. And I will share one piece of knowledge. A photographer from Sports Illustrated said he shot in burst mode because he would shoot thousands of images, but again, he would only choose the one or two. So while this iterative process that these new tools can give us, it's up to us. And trust me, I just took a stand-up comedy class. Jokes are hard, really hard to write and to be concise and in connecting with your audience, and consequently to iterate and practice and get that muscle memory. So that's my perspective on, there's really no secret sauce other than hard work, but hard work can be fun.
Bill?
So there's, I think, and this comes from my following what I used to call the desktop publishing typesetting cycle, when that disrupted everything in printing and the rest of that. Seemed to me there was always 4 steps that we lived through, and I think we're going through the same 4 steps now. First, step 1 is give it to the masses. Step 2 is live with all the dreck that ensues from that. Step 3 is wait for all the early adopters to get bored and move on. And then step 4, which is where it finally matures, is to watch the pros come in and begin using the tools with intent. I think the reason there's so much bad content is that we're in step 1 still, and will probably be for a couple of years. 5 or 7 years down the road, this could be an incredibly powerful tool, and we'll probably stop seeing so much junk and see the results of allowing people to interact with this technology and do really stunning work.
Well said. Alex?
I think there's a lot of places that we can use it to communicate what we want, but I think we have to come to grips with content is about to go into hyperinflation. So it's about to be massively commoditized. So if you're trying to you really need to think about how you use content to move ideas forward or to build community or do other things like that. But selling content or making money off of advertising and content is probably going to be something that doesn't work for much longer, maybe another decade. And so we're about to go into the value of items because it's going to be so easy to generate so much content. If you look at what we've been talking about here, selling the content as an item is probably not going to happen for much longer. And so I think that's something I think we do have to come to grips with.
And John, to answer your question, what we call like feeding the machine, in the sense of, for an example, with ChatGPT, we try to put in as much information as possible. So say for said client or whatever the project is making sure that here are press releases, here's bios, here's data on the last months of social media content. Like, so by putting that information in there, that it really does form more of a voice and giving more of a persona around the person, so that when ChatGPT then goes in to actually like give us a response, it's not as generic. So it has that pop to it. So that's just one of the ways that we're looking at that and making sure we don't lose the voice of the person while we are using ways that we're optimizing our workflow. Next question.
Sky Gleason, Seattle, Washington, here on the panel. Who is using AI inside Adobe products and how?
Sky?
Well, they've been doing beta, and again, that their community is being built on the Discord site. They're doing a lot of iterative, let's learn together, and to Alex's point, labs. And again, they're not big groupings of people, but they're very interested and people testing things out. And again, Adobe, what I liked, and John Preto predicted this, 5-6 months ago, is once it gets inside the tools you already know, the professionals, to Bill's point, the professionals are going to take a hold of it. And I thought the layering was the really cool thing. But Ken, now that you said there's what the new tool that's now available on MidJourney, that's a game changer again.
John?
If you go to firefly.adobe, you'll see everything that they're working on. Text to vector is absolutely one of the things you're going to see in Illustrator come out, and that's going to be fantastic. And you'll see it, and you'll see it in Premiere, and you'll see it in After Effects. You'll see generative art everywhere, included in every application. The generative fill in Photoshop, beta version of Photoshop, is absolutely stunning. Creating stuff on an image that's not there is spectacular. It's super, super useful. I've been using that more than I've been using MidJourney.
And Alex?
And I use MidJourney with the generative in Photoshop. So I'll build a base image in Photoshop and then or in MidJourney, and then I'll go, okay, now I need to add a monitor here or put something else here. And what the generative fill will do in Photoshop is it'll take the style of what I built in MidJourney and then build the items that I want in there in the area that I selected. And as soon as they get its matting is weird, because it just grabs part of the image so that it can integrate itself, but it is building shadows and everything else. It makes that feel like it's part of the MidJourney composition that I built.
And Ken?
Yeah, I don't want to rain the parade for all the Adobe users out there. Generative fill can be done for free. Program called Leonardo.ai. They've been doing it for a while. Really good job. We have both, so we know both. So Leonardo.ai, you still have to get. You still have to put your email address in to get registered for it, but they're a lot quicker now. But Leonardo.ai can do generative fill. It's been doing it for a while and does a really good job. So if you don't want to pay for the Adobe products, and as I said, for example, there is also, I already spoke about the vector that you can create vectors in MidJourney now. So if you don't want to pay for the Adobe suite, there are good AI applications out there that are as good, and I think a bit better.
I actually just started using Firefly. I'll drop a video in the chat. That was part of one of the videos we did for the challenge, just showing people how, especially startups and founders, when you're doing your pitch decks, or maybe there's a concept that you're trying to get out there and your startup, so you're doing something that probably has not been done yet, that you can bring those words together and try to see if you can pull together a really good concept. But one of the things that I do want to point out about Adobe, which will be interesting to watch as it unfolds, is their focus on the ethics and giving credit, and where, like if you're a creator and you do not want to have your work put into their language learning model, that you can say do not, and it won't. So I think they're somewhat like they're leading the way, and it's something to watch to see how that goes, because right now, while it's in beta format, that when it does become commercially used, that companies that they won't necessarily have to worry about that. So they can move freely in the AI space. So it'll be AI generative art, I should say, space. So it'll be interesting to watch. So just keeping our eyes on that. Alex?
I think I'm going to just keep saying this, that I don't think that the real risk for artists or for people making content is copyright infringement. The real risk is that people will be building tons of content that they enjoy on their own and from each other. If you look at TikTok, that's very based on each other. It's that people will build things. I build so many things on MidJourney every day that bring me just joy. Like I just enjoy making something that's goofy. It's whatever I want. It's whatever. And I think that people being able to generate very high quality things for themselves and their friends is highly disruptive, and not having to have a big studio and not having to have all those things. And you're going to see people eventually being able to take their iPhone and build whole animations with things and stories and all those other things. And a lot of them will be inside jokes with their friends. It'll be, other things like that. It's going to be commentary on politics. It's going to be all these things. And they're not going to need a lot of tools to do that. And a lot of it won't be very good, but a lot of it will be good for them and to their friends and especially if you look at younger kids, being able to grab onto this stuff, they're going to, and so I just don't know I look at my kids there and their behaviors that just don't watch a lot of TV, so I think that it's the loss of interest in big money content that is really the disruptive thing that's going to happen here, I think.
Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle. Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. How do we get regular people to embrace AI, or should we?
Courtney?
I think there's a lot of fear of AI to begin with, especially for creative people, writers. I've shown it to writers and have it generate some text for them, and they dismiss it fairly quickly. Say, oh, well, I would never, submit something like that, But then I had, I generated a web, a descriptive web page for a person who does consulting, and I just gave it that person's name and, write a descriptive web page, and it wrote a very good outline of what she does. Although it did attribute several works of Joseph Campbell to her, and so she saw that and said, "Oh, well, of course, it's completely wrong. I could never use anything like this." And I said, well, that's just one sentence in 12 paragraphs here. Let's just remove that sentence. And now what do you think? And she goes, well, yeah, I guess it's pretty good description. I could put that on my website. So they're a little slow and they're a little hesitant because of the hallucination. But if you're a creative person, if you're a creative writer where you're not trying to write a documentary or write a historical novel, the hallucinations really just add to the creativity of the storyline. So, Quentin Tarantino does it all the time with history. So he hallucinates about how he would like history to be. So I think ChatGPT can generate really interesting ways to go, and can be a great tool for writers to use if they have writing block. They may never have thought of this direction to take a script, and it can take a script in that direction. And they don't have to use it. They can just use the ideas from it. So they start to see it, as a tool rather than a competitor. So once they get their head around the fact that here's a great tool that they can use, not a tool that's going to necessarily replace them.
Nigel?
Yeah, I think Connie's right. I think you have to make this relevant to somebody. And relevant to somebody isn't necessarily jumping into MidJourney and doing a very complicated image. It's really learning to use things like ChatGPT and maybe helping them get a link on their desktop or show them how to use the browser. and then have them start using it like Google, and then start to encourage the conversation. Find something they're interested in and let them build on it. I actually have a sort of shortcut on my iPhone, and when we go on a trip, I say, create me an iTunes playlist with top 10 songs that are about video or something. By the way, Video killed the radio star. Trevor Horn's Buggles was #1 there. And it's a way of making it relevant to people. And once they see the relevancy, they'll start finding ways of using it.
Ken.
Yeah, Nigel nailed it there. It's relevancy. It's not. It's the way that I do it. There were 2 examples. One very quick one, because we've already shown part of it with Tony. So I worked with Tony on creating shorts for his interviews, and working through him. When you're showing a real example that's going to help them, then that's when they get it, when they see it, and that. So it's find out what issues do they have, and then using the knowledge you have about AI to help show them, well, look, here's how you can use this tool to help to help you. And so that's like, for example, I did with Tony, and now Tony's just running with it and can produce his own short. So that's the way around it. Kind of get rid of the jargon or the mystique around it, or because the biggest piece in the news is anything negative, because negative news sells. So there's always going to be negative news about it. So you put it in context for an issue that they have, and work through that issue with them and show how this can provide a solution. That's the way that you get general folks to start using the tool to help them.
Sky?
Historically, I had some friends that went to Jerusalem, and they came back and they told the difference between the guides showing them a historical site versus a traditional site. And again, that's where these things that change are what people get a hold of. And I think one of the biggest techniques for Tony would be, from the mouth of the guy that's the co-founder of at least MidJourney. He said, if you are an illustrator, you will probably hate me. But if you are an artist, you will probably enjoy this experience. Just as Alex says, he now spends his lunchtimes just creating things. So this is a new opportunity to be creative, to the point that I looked on MidJourney's website, and it started, less than a year ago? It's now got 17 million members, and actively 1,500,000 people are being creative right now. So as a creative outlet, we're being given opportunity that we didn't have before.
Alex?
Yeah, I just think that for me, I don't really worry about trying to persuade people to do anything. I just mostly do things that I'm excited about and show it to them. And they'll either get it or they won't. And some people will get it and some people won't. But I think that it is something that really empowers people with ideas without skills. So they have ideas of things they want to express. They don't have necessarily the skill to execute those, but they want to get them out there. And that might only be the groundwork for bringing in people with skills to do what needs to be done. But I think that's the thing that's kind of exciting, which is what we saw in TikTok and other things where people are, it's not the prettiest. They have all these little effects. It doesn't look like a feature film, but it allows them to express a funny idea for the next 15 seconds or 30 seconds.
Next question.
Comes from Sky Gleason here in the panel, Seattle, Washington. What other web nests are people using? I subscribe to nightcafe.studio and runwayml.com. Are there other nests around?
Go ahead, John.
I sent Sky the link. We have a highly, highly curated list. It's on Google's Sheet, so I can share that out. But these are all apps that we've been using and that we trust. There's about 24 new apps coming out a day. Most of them are clean show. But these are apps that are highly curated, and I'll share that with the group.
And just a quick note for anyone who's wondering, nests are a collection of AI services in one place. So that was coined by Mitchell. Go ahead, Sky.
He gets on and he says, oh, by the way, that was a joke. So nests is a word that we may have watched be birthed right here in front of us. I don't know if it's called a nest or not. I'll let Alex help us define the future words. No?
I don't have. This is the first time I heard it.
Oh, well, it's a collection of AI tools.
That's because he made it up.
I know. Well, it's great. So let's define this again. Let's read it out. What does Nest stand for?
So what I have here is nests are a collection of AI services in one place. So to John's point, he's got the list or the collection of AI tools and services that he has. So the nest. So that's
okay. All right. No, we now we just have to keep on speaking it out into the world, and
like
we'll
the Fenwick framer.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, there are, John said there are dozens a day new AI tools coming out. The one place that I follow is a website called futuretools.io. He creates curates them. He's now almost become an authority on AI with people sending him new stuff. He does a newsletter every Friday where he kind of hones down to what he believes are the good ones. But you can sign up for free on futuretools.io. Or the other way, you can do it in ChatGPT. Use one of the there's an AI tool for that. That's one of the plugins. And so if you have a thing that you're trying to work out, you can ask them what AI tools can help me with X, and it will then list the AI tools that can do that's out and doing that. But futuretools.io is the place to go to. Sorry.
No worries. Next question.
Robert Sababati in Poland. Any suggestions on a better AI copywriter than Jasper? I use Jasper, but I was wondering if there's anything better that you use, and can you share your experience?
Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, we use ChatGPT 4 for the copywriting part, where again it's all down to the prompts, the quality of the prompt. We feed in to it a good example of the copy from the sort of copywriter style that we want, and we put that in, and then we do it the other way around. What Nigel was saying, we put it into that, and then we put it into Grammarly, because so then Grammarly would then at the end of once we get ChatGPT to output, it's then we put that into Grammarly to clean up that copy.
John?
GPT-3 came out in 2020. Their API came out shortly thereafter. Jasper and Grammarly both have been using that API for years. There's a great story of the CEO of Jasper, and when they released ChatGPT in November, there was a little bit of strife going on there. They've got access to the model. The model 4.0 is super expensive if you're using the API. And so that's the reason why we use ChatGPT 4 for $20. It's the best value. But I have to tell you, some of the results I've been getting out of Bard lately have been superior to what we're seeing on GPT-4.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. What copyright considerations do you follow when creating content for clients?
Courtney?
Well, copyright's kind of a moving target right now. It's being there are several precedent lawsuits being filed. I don't think you have to worry very much because currently the intellectual property laws consider that large language model generated stuff or visually generated stuff like MidJourney that are not created by human beings are not copyrightable. So you can't claim copyright to it to monetize it necessarily, but anyone else, you can put it out there and not worry about being sued directly by people who say, well, that looks just like something I designed back in 1922, But the people that are being sued for copyright infringement these days are the people that are creating the large language models that are using those copyrighted images for training the model, and they will be the ones that will be receiving the lawsuits. Eventually, they'll be licensing that information so that they'll pay a fee like ASCAP or BMI, and they'll probably pass that fee along to you if you're going to use the generative AI to generate stuff to be used commercially. You will probably have to pay just a general fee that goes into an aggregated copyright fund that is then paid out in forms of royalties to the people whose images were used in the model. So that's probably the direction it's going. I wouldn't worry about it now, and it's not likely you will be sued directly.
Okay. And one of the things that I have been doing is just making sure that whenever it's really the first phase, so it's like a draft, and then making sure that we go in and we rearrange and make it good, and then hand that off to the copywriter who then polishes it, and then also putting it through plagiarism checkers, like that first draft, putting it through plagiarism checkers, and then going through that. So ChatGPT, plagiarism checker, rewrite the copy, have the copy editor, send it off to the client for review, because typically they will also have their communication teams look through things as well. So that is our process. Ken?
Really, well, it's copyright, or for our clients, we're heavy users of MidJourney. We use MidJourney in stealth mode so that the image isn't shared. So that's for our clients. There, that's what we do when we're using MidJourney. We're in stealth mode. I know it costs more, but it's our clients are happy when we do that.
Alex?
Yeah, I've almost used almost none of it, none of the original footage or the original stuff that I've done. I use it as a brainstorming process and less of a content generation, unless we're using things like Descript to grab certain things and other. I'm going to look at Opus as well. I haven't used that, and so I'm very excited about it. But that's all based on your own content, so that's not something that's necessarily generating something new, from that process. I think that as Courtney said, you're probably fine to use the stuff right now. You won't be able to copyright it, but you also probably are not going to be liable to it, and it's really unknown whether they're going to be able to win those cases in the current the way the courts are structured right now, the chances of winning the lawsuits that they're putting out right now are very low. If the court structure changes, but the chances are probably about less than 10% that they're going to win. As soon as they clear that, as soon as they lose those cases, if that actually happens, you haven't seen anything yet. This is why all the money's going into AI, is because they're waiting for it to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court shuts it down, it will just explode, everywhere. And if it doesn't, then if it does do it, we're probably fine with whatever we did until then, which will be 3 or 4 or 5 years from now.
And we have come to the end of the hour. This is not the last time that we'll have this AI conversation. So please, producers, remember, you can ask your questions, and even asking your questions tomorrow or in after hours. I do want to say thank you to you producers for all of your fantastic questions, to our panel for all of your insights, sharing your workflow and processes with us. And to share, tomorrow, we'll be discussing SPX broadcast graphics with HTML, and Tuomo will be joining us for that conversation. For the rest of the schedule, you can head over to officehours.global. And just to say how far we've gone today, it is 54,608 miles. That's 87,882 kilometers. That's more than 432 million bananas for scale, 2.2 times around the Earth. Again, thank you so much, and our production crew, without which this would not be possible. We will see you all in after hours. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
The live stream for sound devices is about to start.
Oh, I can't wait.
I'm jumping over.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Happy Juneteenth.
It's always a good day when there's a Jordan sighting.
Yes.
And a Sky sighting and a Javier sighting on a Monday.
More, please.
See you again.
The preceding was artificially generated.
All personalities are not actually owned by themselves. Thank you.
Except for the Courtney voice.
That totally, yeah.
That's a one and only, one and done.